Hello and welcome to my YouTube. In this YouTube, I'm going to play my favorite songs from 1956. But before I do that, I would like to review for you what my life was like. What was it like in 1956? I know some of you weren't old enough to have been there. In 1956, I was 12 years old and I was in the 6th grade. Dwight Eisenhower was president, and all of us kids loved to go around saying, "I like Ike, I like Ike." The very first hard disk drive was invented. It weighed 2,000 pounds. You couldn't buy it, but you could rent it for $750 a month, which would be $8,000 a month today. And it only stored 3 megabytes. Today, this little thumb drive stores 16,000 megabytes, and it costs $3.90. My, how times have changed. The SS Andrea Doria sinks after colliding with the MS Stockholm near Nantucket Island. This was a really big story. About 55 people died in that accident, but 1,400 were saved. And that's because the Andrea Doria, it took it about 10 hours to sink, so they had quite a bit of time. And a dozen other ships showed up to help rescue the passengers. Big story. Here's another huge story. Actress Grace Kelly marries Prince Rainier of Monaco. Grace Kelly was considered one of the most beautiful actresses in all of Hollywood. And so we have the beautiful actress marries a real prince, Prince Rainier of Monaco. Big story. A little girl by the name of Norma Jean Mortensen changes her name to Marilyn Monroe. In 1956, she legally changed her name. In the World Series, Don Larson pitches a perfect game in the World Series, the Yankees versus the Brooklyn Dodgers. And by the way, it has never, ever been done again. This is the only perfect game ever pitched in any World Series game in history. Elvis Presley makes his first appearance on TV on a show called The Stage Show. That's the first time the public saw him, and needless to say, the public went crazy, went wild for Elvis. A new house cost $9,550 in 1956. This new Ford car cost $1,900 in 1956. The average income was $4,454 a year. A gallon of gasoline cost 23 cents. Rock and roll music is banned in Santa Cruz, California. And if you read the newspaper article, it results of, quote, obscene and highly suggestive dancing. So the city fathers in Santa Cruz did not want those teenagers out there dancing obscenely with their highly suggestive moves in public. And so they banned any rock and roll music being played in public. Take that, you teenage hooligans. Needless to say, that ban was lifted eventually. The United States tests the hydrogen bomb at Bikini Atoll in the South Pacific. And they had a bunch of old Navy ships they put out there just to see the effect of this bomb on ships. Marilyn Monroe marries playwright Arthur Miller. This was a huge story, and we couldn't figure out why. I mean, here's the beautiful, sexy movie star, Marilyn Monroe, marrying this boring playwright, Arthur Miller? He's an old man. Yeah, but she loved him. The most popular movies were The Ten Commandments, starring Charlton Heston as Moses. Big movie. Around the World in 80 Days, a comedy starring David Niven, a very famous British actor. Giant, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, and a relatively newcomer, James Dean. This was only his third movie. Now, here's the interesting and sad story. James Dean was nominated for Best Actor in the Academy Awards coming up in the next year. This movie was released on November 24th, 1956, okay? November 1956. James Dean was killed in a car wreck on September 30th, 1955. So when this movie came out, he had been dead for more than a year, and yet he was still nominated for the Academy Award. Seven Wonders of the World. This was a movie in Cinerama. Let me tell you about Cinerama. Most of you have never seen a Cinerama movie. First of all, there are only 4 theaters in the entire world that can even show a Cinerama movie. It's that special. I got to see one. My grandmother took me by train up to Chicago, and my aunt and uncle lived up there, and they got us tickets to see the first Cinerama movie. Let me show you what was so special about it. This is what the theater looked like. My aunt and uncle had gotten us tickets on the 5th row, so we were seated somewhere in here. This screen, Cinerama, wrapped completely around me. So if I'm looking straight ahead, all of my peripheral vision for 180 degrees is completely surrounded by this movie. It's as though you are in the middle of this movie. And this is how they filmed it. This camera, they had 3 cameras. One camera filmed everything out here. This camera over here filmed everything over here. And a third camera over here filmed everything over here. And so then they went and they put all 3 of these together in one film, and you had 180 degrees of view in the camera. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video clip of what I saw that night. It started off with a little black and white film in the middle of the screen. The curtains were mostly closed. They just opened up a little bit to show this black and white. I'll show you the black and white, and then I'll show you what happened. Ready? Let's watch the opening of Cinerama.
Motion pictures have been described as like looking at something through a keyhole. You see what is straight ahead, you hear what is straight ahead. And television up to the present, even more confined. But the pictures you are now going to see have no plot. They have no stars. This is not a stage play, nor is it a feature picture, nor a travelogue, nor a symphonic concert, nor an opera. But it is a combination of all of them. In fact, it is the first public demonstration of an entirely new medium, which we believe is going to revolutionize the technique of motion picture storytelling. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cinerama.
Now here's the rest of what happened. So about 3 minutes into the movie, the roller coaster ride came to an end. Suddenly the screen went black and all of the lights came on in the theater. And there was a big commotion because 4 Chicago policemen started rushing down one of the aisles carrying a stretcher. It turns out a middle-aged lady got so scared and so frightened in this movie, this roller coaster ride, she passed out. And they were afraid she was going to have a heart attack. So these 4 policemen put her on a stretcher and they hustled her out of there. Well, as I looked around, I also noticed there were somewhere between 10 and 15 people got up out of their seats and left. They couldn't take it. This movie, this roller coaster ride, was so lifelike, apparently it just scared them to death and they couldn't take any more. They left. That was Cinerama. As a 12-year-old boy, I loved it. Okay, back to the movies. The King and I, starring Yul Brynner, was another huge movie that year. What about TV? The most popular TV shows were I Love Lucy with Lucille Ball. Very popular comedy. The Ed Sullivan Show. We watched it every Sunday night. Without fail, everybody watched Ed Sullivan to see who he was going to have on. And it was a variety show for those of you that have never seen it. And some of the biggest names in Hollywood and singers and performers perform. It was the goal to be on Ed Sullivan. If you made it on Ed Sullivan, you had made it. The General Electric Theater. You may notice or remember this guy for your older folks. He was the governor of California. He was a movie star. He was the President of the United States. Yeah, that's Ronald Reagan. Well, in 1956, he was the host of the TV show The General Electric Theater. And every week on Sunday night, they would put on a different movie. Oh, the $64,000 question. Very popular show. See this booth, if you've never seen the show. When they got up to the big questions, the 16,000, the 32,000, and the 64,000, they put the contestant in this soundproof booth so that they couldn't hear anything. All they could hear was the announcer, the host. They wanted to be sure that nobody whispered or yelled out any right answers for them. Okay? December Bride. I will confess, I don't ever remember watching this. Maybe as a 12-year-old boy, I just wasn't interested. But it was about this spinster and all of her trials and tribulations. December Bride was one of the top 5 TV shows in America. Not to a 12-year-old boy like me. What about music? The Billboard 100. These are the 5 top songs of 1956. Number 1, Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis Presley. 1956 was the big year for Elvis, and you're going to see why. So he had the number 1 song. That's good. What else? He had the number 2 song, Don't Be Cruel, also by Elvis. First and second song, but there's more. Then there was a song called Lisbon Antigua. This was just an orchestral piece. Very, very pretty. My Prayer by the Platters. And a song called The Wayward Wind by a singer by the name of Gogi Grant. I'll confess I cannot name any other song she ever sang. As far as I'm concerned, it was a one-hit wonder. Pretty girl. Beautiful voice, big hit. Don't remember any other. Well, speaking of the Ed Sullivan Show, Elvis Presley, the first time he was really on a big, big show was 1956. He appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, This is interesting. Ed Sullivan had been in a serious car accident, and he wasn't even on the show the night Elvis came. And Ed Sullivan was very concerned about, Elvis and all of his gyrations of his hips and all of those sexual moves that he made. He didn't want any of that. So he made sure that they only filmed Elvis from the waist up. In fact, I'm going to show you a clip. This is what Elvis looked like on the Ed Sullivan Show that night. I've taken the sound out just so we can focus on. Notice how the camera never shows him. But we could hear the audience on the TV show, and we could hear all these hundreds of girls. And when they would scream and squeal, we knew that Elvis was doing something sexy that we couldn't see. But the girls saw it, and they screamed every time he did one of his sexy moves with his hips. Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show. And then, if that isn't enough, he made a movie. Oh, yeah. Elvis starred in his first movie, Love Me Tender. And I went to see that with my mother. This is an interesting occurrence. These 4 popular singers, they were the biggest. Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, you may remember he had a little hit called Blue Suede Shoes. Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire, and Johnny Cash, they all got together by accident in the Sun Studio. And so they decided, well, hey, as long as we're all here, why don't we maybe cut a few songs? And they did. And they put it on an album, and they called it the $1 Million Quartet. The movie Marty won the Oscar for Best Picture that year. And now I'd like to play 5 of my favorite songs from 1956.